It's going to be Olov Redmalm. He's going to be talking about the narrative philosophy and spirituality and all these various things he pulled from to develop this wonderful game. So please put your hands together for Olov Redmalm. Thank you.
Yes, hello everybody. Oh boy. I thought maybe most of you would have a break after Klaus, like, oh, I'll get a smaller audience, it'll be cool, but the room seems full. Jeez. Welcome again to a talk about MoonHood and the Midnight Walk. I'm Olov Redmalm, I'm co-director and co-founder, and I write for our games together with Klaus Lyngeled, who was here a moment ago. And we go way back, about 10 years now, first at Zoink Games, where I started out as an intern, as he told you about the last talk. And yeah, we make games in clay. How many of you went to Klaus's talk? Nice. We make games in clay, cozy horror specifically. But before that, we worked on games like Fe, an EA Originals title. That was my first game I worked on with storyboards and some storytelling. After that, I have started to join the writer's room with Klaus, and I got my first director's job on Ghost Giant, which was a PSVR title. Together we co-directed Lost in Random also, and but then now more recently we co-founded MoonHood and made the Midnight Walk together. And the Midnight Walk is a cozy horror game where you play as the Burnt One, this mysterious figure you play in first person, so you only see your hands. You dig yourself out of your grave, basically, or a clay mold, and you start to discover this giant miniature world where there's a lot of darkness and monsters that want to eat fire, if you have it. And you soon stumble into Potboy here, who has a flame out of his head, and of course all the monsters want to eat Potboy, and you have to protect him as you travel down the titular Midnight Walk, which is a nightmarish highway riddled with terrors, and you have to experience these 5 different tales about fire and warmth and the danger of fire while you protect and nurture this little flame on your way to a giant mountain at the end of the road called Moon Mountain, where you have to light a big fire. Yeah. But before that, we had previously worked on Lost in Random for about 4 years. It was a very fun, very creative project with about 40+ people, some external studios too. Very creative, very challenging. We also did it over COVID, so it was quite taxing on us both. It was a big project, big studio. We got quite burnt out at the end of it. So at the end of the project, Klaus he quit the company and took a break to work on clay figurines, taking a break from games. I was still at the company doing some other projects on the side. I worked a bit on the spin-off to Lost in Random for a year or so before Klaus and I joined forces again with MoonHood. Because one day Klaus came to me from his early pension that turned out to just be more work and showed me this little guy, Potboy. And Klaus is he talks through his paintings, his art. That's where his subconscious storytelling comes through. And I just love to latch onto his art and start talking about what it could mean for storytelling. And we both also talk about the story, of course, and what it could mean for gameplay. And when Klaus showed me this little figure with a flame coming out of its head, of course, that begs for fire-centric gameplay or lighting up a dark world. So we quickly started talking about what if it is this world that's plunged into darkness. You have this really precious flame that everybody wants to get to in different ways, and you have to protect it and nurture it. And to me, it became like a really personal, like coming out of a project where I felt quite creatively burnt out. Both of us were. To me, this was just like, oh, that's like the creative spark, or like there's so much symbolism there to play with. And for me, it became a really personal journey about regaining that creative spark. And this question about we always look to that big mountain. We have that goal. We climb that mountain. We have to get there. If we don't, it's a failure. And when we get there, we keep going past the mountain onto the next mountain, and we keep doing this to ourselves, even though it can be detrimental to our health and stuff like. And I wanted to a question I brought into the storytelling of the game was, why do we keep climbing that mountain? When is enough? So that ties a bit into the story of the game. But with this title, after having made Lost in Random, which was quite commercial and it was kind of like our Harry Potter, it had a lot of loads of dialogue. It was kind of like what you see is what you get, like our Star Wars. It was just an epic fairy tale, and we wanted to create something more personal, and we set out to make poetry, something that you can't quite put your finger on, open to interpretation, and allow players to make up their own story, kind of based on the lore we sprinkle out through the game. A lot of show and not tell, so very art-driven, and we storyboarded a lot of visual storytelling, finding these key moments that we wanted to present in cinematics and the characters you meet. And we wanted to leave a lot of space for interpretation, so yeah, people could make up their own minds of what the story is about, and that's how we also give the players agency in a quite linear game. Like, you make up your own mind what the world is trying to tell you. I have my personal angle coming into the game, wanting to deal with creative burnout, but that's just my angle, and we tried to create a story that was more like a painting where anybody could latch on and make it about their lives. And we wanted to make the narrative and gameplay very interconnected, and we almost try to not tell apart. We try to not talk about narrative as a separate thing that you plaster onto it, or vice versa. They're the same thing. Narrative is gameplay, and gameplay is narrative. And for me personally, I went into this project wanting to explore some spiritual themes, having gone to a silent retreat recently, and all of these questions about burnout and things like that, I brought as my own kind of fuel into the storytelling of the game. Which leads us into what this talk is about, which is spiritual exploration through narrative design in the Midnight Walk. But first off, I'll just show you the trailer of the game and where it ended up after all of these discussions me and Klaus had.
Was the day when the sun began to shine. The longest light up burns with light, and the dark itself seemed to come straight into the blood vapor. And followed the belong. As the midnight walk.
That trailer sure needs subtitles. So what is spirituality in this case? Not specifically religious, but it's to me it's something personal. It could be a personal question you want to ask that you don't have the answer to. In Eastern practice, it is a lot. It's regular to meditate on a question that you need an answer to, or one of the most old ones or classic ones is, who am I, or what am I? But in my case, it was kind of, when is enough enough? And what is more? Lighting that fire over and over. It's intuitive rather than calculated. In our culture, it's celebrated to always know the answers, and even if you don't, I promised myself I wouldn't bring up AI in this talk, but even ChatGPT lies about knowing something when it doesn't. It just scrambles for an answer because it wants to know everything. And then you ask it again, is that really true? No, it isn't actually. Let me give you another lie. So that's how we also work sometimes, because we want to know. But it's just, like, for me, it's thriving in the unknown. Coming in with a question, when you're telling a story that you want to answer, and it's even better if you don't have the answer, I think, too soon, because you're going on a journey, you're an exploration, and you're open to ideas that pop up by the coffee machine from other developers, or as you're on a journey, you're traveling, or just keeping the story fluent and open as much as you can without halting production or having to remake a lot of design decisions because you have a eureka 75% later in the story of the game. But just trying as much as you can to keep things unknown as long as you're writing the story. And it's poetic, trying to paint a picture around something you can't quite put your finger on. And in this talk, I'm going to show you some tips and techniques on how to storytell, how spirituality took shape in the Midnight Walk, and how one can approach storytelling spiritually. But I thought I'd start out a little bit with my background. Some of these points are, like, for me, I've based the info around my background, around what I have found useful going into storytelling for video games, and dialogue and voice acting. Maybe there's something that you can relate to, or something else kind of related to it, but all background is that's the wonderful thing about game development. There's no wasted knowledge. It comes in unexpected ways as you develop your game. But I started out as a comic artist and storyboardist. I studied in a town called Gävle up north in Sweden. Comics wasn't any work in that, so I applied for the game assembly after that. Game school that's mainly in Malmö in Sweden, but now it's also in the UK, I believe, also Stockholm. I studied game art, but I did anything but, it feels like. When we had 8 different game projects we did together with programmers and level designers, and I would usually, I would do some 3D art, but then I would walk around talking to the different disciplines about writing and dialogue and implementing that dialogue and the pacing, and I just loved connecting all of the dots and talking to everybody about the vision. And that's kind of what I shaped my portfolio around and showed to Klaus, and that's where we really hit it off. Storytelling through drawing, and I'm also something of a dungeon master. So I like to see the gaming, like your player base, it's as your people coming over your friends coming over for a role-playing game, because it can be quite a abstract number of people who are going to play your game, like, oh, what do they like, what do they want? And you can gather a group of 5 quite different friends and get an idea of what makes them tick in your storytelling style. So treat your player base like your friends, thousands of them coming into your living room, and you get to engage with them, find a personal connection with them. Like if you've played Dungeons and Dragons or any role-playing game, and even Dungeon Mastered, you know that the players want to do anything but follow your precious main story. They want to go out and make their own story and opinions and talk to the characters you didn't spend an hour writing the background story for. So that's a good way to see, okay, what part of my vision is actually interesting to the players, and it's also an interesting experiment in seeing what makes them personally connected and how you make the story feel about them and not just your self-indulgence. And you get to experiment with what feels fun and meaningful with them. I used to be a necromancer, or I did a little bit of LARPing and theater. I like role-playing, live-action role-playing. And if you like something like that, or improv theater, it's a great way, of course, to practice immersing yourself in characters, coming up with dialogue, and it can be really useful going into the writer's room to jam characters with your co-writer or someone you're trying to pitch an idea to or a scene to. And I was a monk briefly. I went to a silent retreat. Excuse me. The method was called Vipassana. It was supposedly based on what the Buddha did under the tree to get enlightened. I didn't get enlightened, but I found creativity in emptiness and the dark, and it's where sort of a lot of my thinking around themes and in the Midnight Walk comes from, because in the East, darkness is seen as something fertile or there's a lot of possibility in it. It's like where the Big Bang can happen, while in the West it's connected to death and something scary. And I just love that contrast, and it's something I brought with me to storytelling. But at this retreat, we meditated for 10 days straight, scanning the body from top to toe and really feeling every little sensation in the body 24/7 in all our waking hours. And on the 7th day, I think it was, my brain was so bored that I started to hallucinate and see like fractal patterns, and I got really creative, and you weren't allowed to write anything down. So I took toilet paper, I stole a pen, and went in the bathroom and wrote down a bunch of ideas. And I felt like, yeah, I reclaimed my humanity. I'm not this monk, I'm also an artist. And that to me, just that experiencing that a creative boom from nothingness is something that I brought with me into storytelling. And if you are telling a story about fire or all these very primal symbols, or like if you're looking for, like it's always useful to go back to old religious texts if you're building an interesting lore. I mean, I'm sure the Dark Souls, for instance, must have done that a bunch. I think there's a lot of Hindu stuff in there. But like I read the Bhagavad Gita, the Noble Eightfold Path. I like Sufi mystics, the poetry in there. I took a lot of inspiration for that for different aspects of fire storytelling in the Midnight Walk. A lot of inspiration in old texts. So let's go into the story and its themes and how to get started. You have a blank canvas, you have vibes, it doesn't make any sense, but it compels you. So I like to start with a method that David Lynch, creator of Twin Peaks, coined. I'm not sure I'm using it right, but this is how I use it anyway. And he sees storytelling or coming up with an idea or a world as a prism that you shoot light through. So in the case of Twin Peaks, you have your theme or your question, which is who killed Laura Palmer, and that drives the whole story, and also the theme of light and dark and those contrasts, because Twin Peaks is full of, just like how we like to tell stories at MoonHood, it's full of light and dark humor and scariness, drama, sorrow, all of that in a lovely soup. And the stories in Twin Peaks are seemingly very random. It can feel weird for weirdness' sake, but if you watch through the whole thing, it has a really compelling thread. It feels connected somehow. And of course, you get all of these different puzzle pieces about who killed Laura Palmer in Twin Peaks, because all of these people somehow were touched by her. So all the show does is not necessarily answer the question, but get to know this woman in depth through all of these lovely characters and not so lovely characters. So in season 2, when the network forced David Lynch to reveal who the killer was, because they felt like, hey, the viewers want results. They're going to get bored with the story if you don't give them the answer. He felt like that was the whole reason of the story. So I forgot one point. As you can see, the stories seem they scatter through this prism. The light scatters through the prism into this seemingly random rainbow color. But it's actually going back to the same theme. That's what I forgot to say. But yeah, so when they revealed the killer, the show became sort of directionless because it didn't have a question it was built around anymore. This isn't a spoiler for those who haven't seen the show. It's just a silly character. But you can always go back to, if you're writing a story and you feel there's too much randomness, or like you're wondering where you're going next, is this too weird? Is it too disconnected from the main story? You can always go back, follow the light back to its source, and it's light and dark, and who killed Laura Palmer. And the same goes with the Midnight Walk. For us, it's everything. Potboy's fire drives everything, and also the theme of light and dark. And through that, shooting that light through the prism, you get all these rainbow colors of random story, or like different stories about warmth, the beauty, and also the danger of fire, the frailty of creative spark, because Potboy's fire can easily get snuffed out. Finding wisdom in the dark, because you have this game mechanic where you close your eyes to listen for secrets and also see the world differently, feel the world differently. And there's a lot of themes in the game that are coming in about how the dark actually might not be too bad, and you need both. When it's about wanting more, and when is enough, lighting these bigger and bigger fires and burnout. We also go back. You can also go back to that theme when it comes to game mechanics. Also, it drives what the game mechanics are about. Of course, we have these areas in the game where you have to use Potboy's light to light your way through the dark, and also you have these monsters who want to eat his flame, tying back to the frailty of your creative spark and all this darkness that just wants to eat your creativity. And yeah, with that mechanic, closing your eyes and listening to through the dark, finding wisdom in the dark, ties back into the storytelling theme. So that's how we marry narrative and gameplay, by going back to the theme of the story. But now going into a little bit more practical stuff, less whimsy and more how do you actually start writing the story and connecting the dots of all your different ideas and the theme and painting a big picture. So for us, we're a very visual studio, so in the very beginning we start out with a lot of paintings, just of taking the line for a walk, as Sean Tan says, and just finding interesting pictures that we want to walk into and explore. So we have the 5 fairy tales that we early on knew we wanted to make. So the Tale of the Burnt One, where we get to know the main character and establish the relationship between them and Potboy. And we have the second chapter, which is a lot about greed, and we have this Molgrim character, this Grook almost, who terrorizes these little headlings in the village. We have the ghost story. Every horror game needs a good ghost story. So there's a abandoned, frozen ghost town where you have to relight a giant oven with Potboy's fire. You have to relight something in every chapter with his fire. And there's a ghost there. Also taking the creativity theme very literally here. We have a chapter about the craftsman, who is this giant craftsman who builds a big miniature set around you that you have to navigate and try to get to his heart that has gotten snuffed out, and you have to relight his heart using Potboy. We also have this chapter that talks about the dark itself, this omnipresent character. It's like the dark is a character that follows you around the world. You're unsure of what it wants, but it's established as an antagonist in the beginning. And here towards the end, we soften the character and make it more of a supporting character. Supportive. And in the end, we have Moon Mountain, the final light you have to light up, and the mountain you have to climb in the end. Between that, also the Midnight Walk, the road, where there's a lot of quiet, and we wanted to give that space in between each chapter. So even though it's been a very busy chapter with a lot of information and a story to piece together, we wanted the Midnight Walk to be the quiet time where you reflect on what's happened, and that's a lot of show, don't tell. And then, so having those images that we want to spread out across the whole game, I like to use a tool called the story clock to start structuring the whole thing. So it's a circle, and at 12 o'clock the story begins, and at 12 o'clock it ends. So we start out with a chapter with the Burnt One, and then the Loathsome Molgrim, Coalhaven, all of them kind of sprinkled out. The point is to get a nice pacing and make these different post-it notes where you, in different colors, to get a sort of a visual overview of how often something happens, if you need to spread out some of the story elements, and just fill up, see where it seems empty. Maybe you end up with an empty Act 3 because everything juicy is happening in the end, in the middle. So we start with the most important character, Potboy, establishing that his fire is important and that it can die and get eaten by the crawlers. And then we go down and introduce Housey, his best friend, which is also a way of showing Potboy's emotions, and you become very fond of both of them because you see how they interact and they become friendly. And you also use Housey as your collectible, the walking collectible house. It's a walking house that follows you along the road. So it becomes a very important character to you. We quite early on knew we wanted Housey to burn, so we had a scene towards the last act where we wanted to sort of show that fire can be dangerous. Sorry, spoiler for those who haven't played, but that even though you have good intentions, if you have a lot of fire, it can easily go wrong or turn into a forest fire. So that's where we wanted to drive home that point, and we do these quick storyboards to get these key images we use as pillars and always come back to remember, like, that moment, remember that moment. It's really worth trying to get us there. And those are the ones we sprinkle out around the story from then on, maybe you put in an antagonist there and how often that one appears. You know, I love Star Wars. I love how Darth Vader is evenly split. Darth Vader makes an appearance at a nice regular pace in The Empire Strikes Back, for instance, and it makes me want to stick around for the rest of the movie as a kid. But also now, but in different ways. Anyway, Star Wars. This is not about Star Wars. Get hold of yourself. So yeah. And NPCs, see how often they appear. The Soul Fisher is this mysterious character who appears along the way and gives you wisdom and kind of wraps up the chapters. And the enemies, how often do they appear? And yeah, sorry, back. So here you can see, hopefully we have, at the end, we hopefully have a nice sketch of a good pace, not too much blue next to each other or black, and yeah, hopefully get an idea of your pacing, and it's so much more easy to get a visual representation, I think, than just going on a blank Google Doc canvas and trying to write all of this. So a lot of visual stuff, post-its, and from there, some more visualization before we start writing. Storyboarding the chapters or doing concept art. Don't underestimate your artists, of course, because chances are they are also big hippies and want to explore philosophy with you and bounce ideas with you. And if you have one idea for a story and then they paint something based on that, like 5 new things are going to appear from that painting, and you're going to be grateful for it. And of course, yeah, art feeds stories and stories feed art. So it's really important to just get that image in your head out there. If you can't do it yourself, talk with an artist. And also make space to get dreamy. And I usually sit in if you can, like it's so hard to imagine these things or write or do any sort of visualization in an office surrounded by people. And if you sit and close your eyes around people, people are going to think you're just having a nap. But you're getting dreamy. So maybe you need to let people know that this is actually part of the process. But maybe you get a sneaky nap, or you get a dark, quiet room where you can sit and visualize and talk to yourself and just really role play your way through the way. And like, I'm walking down the road and oh, there's Potboy, and this character appears and he says, and maybe you start talking to yourself and like, oh, well, hello there, and it's awkward, but it gets you somewhere rather than just a blank paper. I just get so stuck there. Draw your script. We do a lot of storyboarding at MoonHood also. We actually start out with a script before we write it. I get to that in a little bit. First, before storyboards, here's an example of how art feeds story. So this is the Molgrim, the beautiful Molgrim that Klaus created, one of the first models he created for the game together with Potboy. And we knew we wanted a chapter around that, and that the Molgrim kidnaps Potboy because she wants his fire. But it felt a bit small. We needed something more sidelined, but like to the side of that, we had talked about a village where there are these headlings, also that you can meet just these funny characters. We didn't have a story for that, so we put those together and combined them into one chapter, and so then you get a chemical reaction from that. I immediately started wondering, but where are their bodies? Do we need to answer that question? Is it just a weird kind of fantasy logic? In this case, we thought it was fun to explore where the bodies had went. So we've shaped this whole idea about that the heads had banished the bodies because they waged war on each other. And they had the guillotine where they cut off their bodies and banished them, and became this kind of silly, for me, this silly story about spirituality, about connecting mind and body. And again, tying back to my time at the silent retreat, where it was about reconnecting my mind with my body. And so much of pain and anger in our lives comes from like the mind and body not coexisting, or like not correlating or co-working correctly. Mind sending suggestion to your body to feel bad. Body feels bad, makes your brain feels bad. So finding peace again with your different body parts. So from then on, now we have these bigger ideas, or like bigger, wider concepts. We go into more detail by storyboarding all the way. You have sat in your dark room and started visualizing, and you're getting too many ideas in your head, so you got to start writing it down or drawing it. Maybe help with another artist if you don't like drawing yourself. So here's the full script of chapter 2, The Loathsome Molgrim. Some of it is not readable, but just trying to picture it yourself. And sooner or later, sketching out here, you start down the road, you arrive at a village where these headlings gather around a council, you light their fire and impress them, and they tell you about their problem with the Molgrim, who then storms into the village, eats their fire, eats some of them, it's a whole thing, and we start visualizing those scenes. That becomes also like a key image that we go back to. And then you follow the Molgrim because she kidnaps Potboy, and in her cave you see there's another dead Molgrim, and we start sprinkling out the story, giving you an idea that everything is not what it seems to be. And finding recordings, notes, and other characters, you find out that the heads actually, when they had bodies back in the day, they used to hunt Molgrims, and so the Molgrims are actually oppressed, and the Molgrim is just angry because she's grieving. So you have to repair her broken cauldron and relight it with fire, and then we came to this other pillar image that like, oh, we want a really beautiful scene at the end where she storms into the cave, she's about to eat you, but then she sees the flame and she just calms down, is by the fire. Her partner starts to disintegrate and sort of cremate up into the sky, like the roof of the cave turns into a starry sky, it's magical, like a witchy ceremony, and that just became, it would be so hard to explain in words, so that image became something we came back to. Like it took a year to get all of the effects, the sounds, the voice acting, and animation. There's so many puzzle pieces that need to fit, and someone like, so you always, it's easy to give up on an idea that takes too long, and it can help to have these images to come back to, like, no, remember this one, it's worth not cutting. Sometimes it's worth cutting, a lot of the time it's worth cutting, but yeah. And this is an example of what it looked like in the end after that whole process.
She'd never been much for company until she had met the other one. He had shimmering scales, an appetite for life, and carried a faint scent of rotten leaves she found irresistible. Oh, how they used to laugh at the distant stars, bitterly, together.
And that brings us into the final step of the detail layering of making a story, which in some cases, not always, is dialogue. And again, helps a lot to go in a dark room and talk to yourself, jump into different characters' shoes. I use speech to text. I sit with a Google Doc on my phone and sit and make funny voices and talk to myself alone, so you don't overthink what you're saying and don't judge yourself, just go for it. And then you have your first draft instead of sitting there trying to cram it out on paper among lots of different people sitting around you. Maybe ask to work from home a day. That helps me a lot to get dreamy. And when in doubt, go back to the themes of the story. All of the characters, you want to make them feel like they have their own lives, their own will, and they're not just tools to tell a main story or force a main story on the player. But it's good to sprinkle in, even the crazier ones, sprinkle in some of the messaging you want, or just or someone mentioning fire if that's your theme, or that it's cold, or like it doesn't have to be directly the theme they're talking about, but indirectly. And remember that your characters have opinions and they lie, so it's easy to just make a character, maybe design forces you to have a character that's just spewing the quest information, you have to go kill the dragon, but try to sprinkle out the information, all of the truths, and different characters having differing opinions on the quest you're embarking on. And let players decide for themselves what is right or wrong, or what something means, because that's how you give them agency, even in a linear story, because they feel like they're creating the story with you. They're good detectives. We all are. We love connecting the dots. Don't underestimate your players, and that makes them feel like the story is theirs, and makes them, of course, emotionally invested, because they. Like, no, this is what the story is, and someone else on a forum goes, no, this is what the story is about, and then you have something interesting there. This is just an example of what it looks like when we start plucking apart the storyboard images and put them in a Google Doc and start writing the dialogue, which we start filling in the gaps, the in-betweens between the images with dialogue. And but yeah, just to wrap things up a bit, find creativity again, or regain your creative spark by confronting yourself and asking why you're feeling uncreative, or just find a problem or an interesting question you want to answer. And go on a journey of discovery and keep it open. Don't be in a hurry to have all of the answers, because you're going to find something more interesting along the way if you don't decide what the ending is, or have a sketch of the ending, but be open to changing it. Identify your themes, maybe by using the prism. There can be several themes that you want to come back to, and keep referring to them when in doubt. In all cases, gameplay, dialogue, narrative, all of it. And it helps to visualize scenes and characters. If you feel stuck in writing, even without their context, just take the line for a walk, or go on Pinterest and just make a mood board and base a story off an image you love. Connect the dots using the story clock that I showed you is a good example of I think, of structuring a story when it can feel so whimsical and daunting to go on a blank canvas and come up with something out of nothing. Again, let the player make their own conclusions in your story. Don't feed them what you want them to feel and about the story. Don't tell them or maybe some stories are about this is good, this is bad, and it has an agenda. But most of the cases I find let people come to that conclusion themselves by just solving your clues. Talk to yourself in the dark. Make some space to get dreamy. And don't be afraid of the dark. And hope you have fun on your creative journey, whatever it might be. I hope there's some inspiration, even if you're not writing a story. Everything, I think, is some sort of story. If you draw or you program, I hope there's some inspiration for not getting stuck in your workflow here. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Olov. I took note there that you said the creative boom from nothingness, which I think is quite a good line. But we have some minutes here for a Q&A, so I'll just ask a few questions. You spoke about Star Wars and the plotting a story through visualizing your narrative. I was wondering, have you taken inspiration from other media or other art forms in how to craft a story?
Well, comics a lot. Drawing comics, I think, and because it's such a balance between the spoken word and what you see on an image, and it's visual, but you're also allowing the reader to create together with you, because you're filling in the gaps between each comic panel. And that goes for reading books too, of course. Like, it's such a co-creating experience with the reader, because you don't get all these images fed to you also. But we have a lot of David Lynch movie nights in the office, and just I love how I've always been inspired just by how he managed to make a very abstract and weird story, but it makes sense at the same time, or it can be so interpreted differently by different people. Also Miyazaki movies, and just how the matter-of-factly weirdness in them. Like, of course, there are a bunch of hopping heads here. That's not the point, or it is the point. It's magic, but you don't have to understand why, or just send people into dreamlike experiences like that.
David Lynch, another man who likes sitting in the dark.
He talks
like
a lot
yourself.
about that, right? Yeah.
Like transcendental meditation.
Yeah. I may have taken a lot of inspiration from it.
Yeah, cool. And in terms of, also you said, talking about interpretation, and I think David Lynch was famous with kind of almost pushing people further into the hole.
Oh, yeah.
Or into the dark, you know. So how did you decide when to explain versus when to leave things open to the player or the...
Well, in the case of game development, always if like sometimes you just need to be very clear about what you need to do in the game to actually progress, and it's been a really hard balance in the game too, because we wanted to make a game that's not holding your hand too much, but in some cases we have some new mechanics like closing your eyes or sending Potboy around that aren't very conventional, and then you need to tutorialize them. But if you can, it's fun to experiment with what is weird enough. I think Alan Wake 2 is such a lovely example of how sometimes I feel stuck in the game, I don't understand what to do, and it's just bordering on like, is this bad game design, or is it just very, do I feel lost in a good way? And usually it's lost in a good way, because it becomes part of the experience to wonder a bit what to do next. And that's a very nice balance to try to hunt for, I think, or fun for our part.
Yeah, and the term cozy horror that Klaus was talking about, like I guess it's kind of an oxymoron, but you've really kind of found that cozy and unsettling. Like, what was the biggest challenge in trying to define that style, or did it come more naturally?
No, I think for me, I'm a quite late bloomer when it comes to horror. I started really daring to watch proper horror for like 15 years ago or so. And so for me, I want for my case personally, I wanted us to make a game that was welcoming to players who are not so used to horror, and that's where Potboy comes in, and he kind of warms you up and softens you up or like makes you welcomed, and then we stab the player or like we subject them to horrors. But it's always this like break of like, oof, okay, I can calm down, sit by the fireplace with this character. And horror can be also just a great way of scaring someone, can soften you up for other emotions also and make you feel love or caring about a character. And so we wanted to avoid making a purely cynical horror story, because that just scares me away. It's great for some cases. I mean, it's fun to play together with friends, I think, but I don't like playing single-player cynical experiences.
Yeah, nice. Well, I want to thank you so much for the talk and for answering a few questions there, and both to Olov and to Klaus for opening up the world of the Midnight Walk. It's amazing. So please put your hands together again for the MoonHood team. Brilliant.